Okay. And we'll get going in just a minute. Our major co-host, Don. Just a couple odds and ends. Don last night gave me a small heart attack. Uh,
You think you had one?
yeah, he wrote and said, "Oh, I've lost total access to the internet, so don't know if I can do the presentation tomorrow." And I was trying to figure out what to do. My plan B, I told him, "Don't worry, don't overstress. I have a plan B." Plan B was either going to have Carol read her poetry, or I was going to show some of the car wrecks I've worked on. So luckily, he got it back. But I had to ask you, Don. This is a little bit of a trick question. When the Spectrum folks told you to troubleshoot, what was the device they told you to disconnect to make sure it wasn't part of the problem?
Well, they actually kept telling me the router was part of the problem, even though I had disconnected it already and plugged directly into the back of the modem.
Right, now the router, what does it do? Does it route traffic?
It's just it's a Wi-Fi router basically, and it also allows me to keep Spectrum from spying on the computer. Basically, it puts a firewall between me and them.
Okay, now then, why is it not a router if you insisted Route 66?
Because Route 66 is an old American term that started in the 20s. Routers came about much later, as you know. We've changed the pronunciation.
No, no, everybody should be going to the computer routers, and I admit it, I got you. Anyway, Don, really appreciate you coming back. A number of people really enjoyed the first talk. One fellow who could not make it today had joked that he was stranded in a cheap motel on Route 66 along the way and was looking forward to finally getting back to California. So a number of people were super appreciative of the talk. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Don and get us out here to California.
All righty, let me go ahead and share my desktop here. My dog suddenly decided he wanted to join me. He's trying to climb in my lap. Roger, off, out, go. Thank you. Good dog. All right. Dog wants to be part of the presentation. All righty. Can you folks see this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good deal. Let me get my notes up and move the chat window over to here. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Bill, for once again giving me a chance to present on this. If you haven't figured it out, this is one of my passions. My wife and I, for those who weren't here for the last presentation, my wife and I have traveled Route 66. We try to study it before we go there, get to know the people and the stories and the lesser known routes. And it's become something of a passion for us. And I really enjoy the opportunity to present here. Before we get started, a bunch of people asked for the reading list last week. This was my introductory reading list. I won't spend a lot of time here, but I'll keep the slide up while I talk about a few other things. If you're going to read one book about the route, this first one here, Route 66 Some Other Road by Michael Wallace, is the must read. It's about, 15, 20 years old now. And many of the sites and people that he talks about have long since passed, but it still tells you what the route is about, why so many people are passionate about it. It gives you a real feel for the spirit of the route. The Route 66 guide, the second one, is actually written in 1945. So just as the golden age was getting into heavy gear. And it's a guide that was written that tells you what the route looked like way back before we had interstates. And the last two are good books to keep with you while you're on the road. We always have these two. The Easy 66 guide tells you where all of the lost alignments are, and the other guide is the most thorough guide I've seen to landmarks and such on Route 66. So just a little bit of history for those who weren't here. Route 66 started as a system of roads from Chicago to LA in the mid-1920s, 1926. Most of it at that time was a one-lane dirt road. As time went on, it expanded. They required people pave those roads, and the alignment of the route, the direction of the route changed from time to time, going from one town to another. And when that happened, they would leave the old road behind. That's called an old alignment. When an alignment changed, it would frequently take the town out with it because all the money that was coming down the route was lost. I cannot tell you how important the route was economically for the towns along it. They made their living. The traffic was tremendous, especially in the golden age. The route went through 4 ages. The opening age that was just, setting it all up. The Depression Dust Bowl age, where all the people from Oklahoma and that area tried to get to California to find jobs. That's the Grapes of Wrath movie there. The Golden Age, when after World War II, when America wanted to travel and they used the route. And this is the busiest age when all the motels and things that we'll see today mostly sprung up. Then there was the decline as the interstate system began to bypass the route and all its old alignments, and towns just began to die. Finally, what I call the death of the route, which was in the early 80s when the route was decommissioned and almost, the interstate was complete and there was almost no traffic on it. In the last 15, 20 years, there's been a rebirth in tourism, people traveling the route, including people from Europe, actually. So, and Japan, yeah, and all over the world, actually. So it's become a very popular tourist site. Man, they give me a time hack on this, will you? Because my timer started when I got on. Okay. So last time we left off at Tucumcari, and we were just about to enter the town. Tucumcari is a good dividing line. It's not exactly at the center of the route. It's actually about 100 miles past it. But this is where the route changes from lush green plains and forests and mountains into more desert territory. Tucumcari was known as a huge motel town. They had signs all along the route saying Tucumcari tonight, 2,000 motel rooms. Later, as the interstate began to bypass it, that dropped to 1,200. Now I'd be surprised if there's more than a couple hundred there, if even that. A lot of abandoned motels in the area. When you first enter Tucumcari, you'll find this is a Route 66 landmark, the TP Curio Shop. This actually was founded, I gotta move my chat window, I can't see my notes. This was actually built in 1944 as a gas station.
Have you moved it on to?
Oh, yes, it's right here, sweetie.
Okay, I thought that was on.
Okay, so yeah, it moved on. I'm sorry, it became a curio shop in 1960. The guy who bought the gas station tore down the pumps, put this wooden or cement teepee in the front, and began selling curios. The guy who owned it before him actually had a curio section. It was a meat market and curio shop. I'm not sure how he thought that combination would work, but that's what he was doing. This is a rather famous stop on Route 66, and there are very few shops like this left. They used to be everywhere. Tucumcari is a great example of the Golden Age. There are lots and lots of old motels along there. Many of them closed, a few open. The Motel Safari is a really nice example of mid-century modern stuff. There's the La Cita. This is a Mexican restaurant, also fairly well known for its famous hat. I understand the food's not necessarily great, but the hat has many detractors and admirers. Many people love it. Many people think it looks like a traffic cone sitting in a wash tub. So, and just another sign along the way. If I showed you all the old and new motel signs on this, we'd be here all afternoon. But the jewel of Tucumcari, and one of my favorite stories, is the Blue Swallow Motel. The Blue Swallow, I'm going to change my window here because I can't see my notes for some reason. 1 second. There we go. The Blue Swallow Motel was actually first built as the Blue Swallow Courts in 1939. So it's been on the route a long time. But in 1958, a man by the name of Floyd Redmond purchased it as an engagement gift for his fiancée, Lillian. And Lillian is another one of those very well-known people along Route 66. She ran the hotel with her husband until he passed away in the 70s, in 1973, and continued to run it from there on out. Lillian's story is fascinating. She came to Tucumcari via covered wagon in 1915 with her family. And she stayed in Tucumcari for the rest of her life and ran the Blue Swallow, or at least she ran it until a few years before her death. And even after she sold it, she kept court there. She never really left the lobby. And she passed away in 1998. Lillian is one of those people, like Lucille, who we talked about later, who is just incredibly well known for her kindness and her hospitality. If you needed a room, you didn't have enough cash, she would accept items in trade. If you had maybe some crops or some fruit or something, she would accept that in trade. If you still couldn't afford it, she'd find a way to get you put up somewhere. And they didn't have a cafe, but if you were hungry and had to have food, Lillian would cook you up something in her kitchen. She also loved to just sit out there and tell the stories about the route, like so many people. And so she's really famous for just being one of the kindest, most genuine people on Route 66. By the way, the Blue Swallow became famous when Lillian and her husband bought it. They replaced the original sign with this sign you see here, which is a famous sign on Route 66. And as gorgeous as it is during the day, it's even more beautiful at night. Getting a room at the Blue Swallow is tricky. There are only 10 rooms, I believe. And the place fills up during tourist season, which is during the summer. We got a room in there, but we made sure to book it before we started the trip. Most of the time when we're traveling, we don't book rooms in advance. We just find a motel and we stay. But for the Blue Swallow, if you want to stay here, and you do want to stay here, you need to book in advance. Now, this is the original sign for the Blue Swallow Court. It's located, still hanging in the back. This is Lillian Redmond. Inside every room and in the lobby, you'll find a picture of her. And Lillian put in every single room a little benediction. I won't read the whole thing. It's actually quite long, but to give you an idea of what she was like, they keep that benediction in every room next to her picture. And we stayed there one night, and this is part of what I read. It says, may this room and motel be your second home. May those who love you be near to you in your thoughts and dreams. Even though we may not get to know you, we hope that you'll be as comfortable and happy as if you were in your own house. May the business that brought you this way prosper. May every call you make and every message you receive add to your joy. And when you leave, may your journey be safe. So you don't see that sort of thing in a motel very often. She was a very special lady. I wish I'd gotten to meet her. In the first book I talked about, she's interviewed extensively. Quite a character. This is actually a picture. It's a little messed up. This was our room at the Blue Swallow. One of the things they pride themselves on is keeping the hotel the way it was when it was originally built. You'll notice that there is a rotary phone, not a touch-tone phone, for example. You notice the bathroom would be perfect for Superman because it's about the same size as the phone booth. The only conceit they give you is a TV. They do have air conditioning because Lillian added it. And the sign, by the way, reads all refrigerated air rather than air conditioning because air conditioning was still a new thing at that time. Every room had its own garage. This was our room there in the corner. So, and that's it for the Blue Swallow. Again, if you want to get a sense for what it was like to travel during the route, during its golden age, in these little cabin-based motels, I highly, highly recommend the Blue Swallow, and I highly recommend you reserve in advance. As you move out of Tucumcari, you move into the desert, you start heading for Albuquerque and Santa Rosa. Now, you'll notice a couple of arrows on this map. I've modified this map a bit. There's a great story here that most of the maps won't tell you. When you hit Santa Rosa, the route, actually, you'll see this triangle, would take a turn north up to Las Vegas, New Mexico, over to Santa Fe, and then down to Albuquerque. That was the original alignment of the route. It followed the Santa Fe Railroad, as the route tended to do. But in 1927, that all changed. You see, in 1927, the mayor of New Mexico lost his bid for re-election, and he was not happy. He blamed the party bosses in Santa Fe for costing him his job. And as a matter of fact, he blamed the entire town of Santa Fe because he felt they should have voted for him, and he didn't think they did. So he swore to get revenge. And the day after he conceded the election, he ordered a bypass from Santa Rosa to Albuquerque be built. Now, he only has 3 months left on his term, and that's not enough time to build a stretch of highway that long, but it didn't stop him. He went out there, got a crew working 24/7, and that includes on Christmas Day, and began to build. He built across public land, private land, federal lands, never got permission right away or purchased anything. He just slammed his way through. He was determined to cut off Santa Fe from Route 66. On the day of the inauguration in January, he hadn't quite made it, and it looked like everything was going to be okay, but a sudden freak snowstorm came in and prevented the new governor from calling down and stopping the work, and the crews continued. By the time word got to them, the new route was completed, cars were driving on it, and it was a fait accompli. It was done. So a few years later, the Route 66 Commission approved that as Route 66, and Santa Fe was permanently cut off from the route. The only way to get there now is on the old alignments. And it's much faster, and it's actually a much better route. But the reason that we did it wasn't because it was better. It was because some politician wanted to get revenge on the city of Santa Fe. This threw that whole section of the route, the old alignment, into disarray. All along it are these abandoned cafes and motels. You'll see, notice most of them are advertising something cold. Here's cold beer, for example. In the desert in the summer, you wanted to have water, you want to have anything cold. Here's another one advertising ice cream. But there's almost no businesses along this route until you hit Las Vegas, New Mexico. Now, Las Vegas, New Mexico is actually an interesting town in its own right. I didn't cover it here. There's not a lot that's really photogenic in Las Vegas. They have an old train station where Teddy Roosevelt gave a speech. They have an old Harvey House. We'll talk about Harvey houses later. But my favorite place there, most Route 66 guys won't talk about, and it's called the Dwan Lake Sanctuary. It sits on the campus of something called the United World College. Inside there is one of the most fascinating displays I saw on the route. It's a fairly new thing. If you notice off to the side, these windows, on every side of it and on the top, there are prisms, huge prisms, and large collections of them. So when you go inside, you get these rainbows. Now, we went in on a cloudy day near sunset. The sun was near the horizon, so what we saw wasn't nearly as impressive as what most people see, where you see all these white stripes in the background. Those are often prisms. If you go near high noon, the whole place is just awash with color. Here's my wife modeling the most recent thing in rainbow attire. I highly recommend to stop here. The acoustics are amazing in here. I have a friend who plays Native American flute. He loves to come in here and play if he's all alone. I'm hoping to bring a harmonica back there. But the prisms and the light is just absolutely beautiful. It's calm, it's peaceful. It's really a worthwhile place to stop and rest from your journey. This is what is unquestionably the oldest hotel on Route 66. It's located in Santa Fe, and it's the La Fonda Hotel. The La Fonda has been an inn of some sort since, get this, 1607. Nothing on the route even comes close. It was on an old Indian route, Indian path that was then later used as the westward expansion happened. Then the railroad came this way and would stop here. Later, Route 66 came by. So this is easily the oldest place on the route. It was a Harvey house as well. I'm going to keep using that term. I'll get into Harvey houses later, I promise. The present structure actually was built in 1922. It's filled with gorgeous artwork. Each headboard has its own hand-painted design on it. So there's no two headboards in a hotel alike. One of the maintenance men paints these wonderful painted glass windows that are all throughout. And you could take a tour to see the art there. I liked this because it was a mosaic that they could move around. So people can come up, grab a square, move it somewhere else, and change the paintings on the fly. That's all. Santa Fe, if you know Santa Fe, it's a great place. There's a lot of it. The buildings look pretty much alike, but inside there's wonderful shopping and such. But we're going to move on pretty quickly. I didn't mention before, I think maybe we're not going to get to even 10% of what we saw on this trip. If you were here last time, you know what I mean. Route 66 is a very, very deep rabbit hole. So if I miss one of your favorite places or didn't spend as much time as you think I should on a city, I apologize. Even with what little I'm going to give you, we're going to have a hard time coming in on time. So we're now in Albuquerque. And as you drive into Albuquerque, you'll drive down another golden age strip of Route 66 with tons and tons of old neon signs. If you love neon signs, Albuquerque is your city. Probably more there than any other place on the route. But the place I'm going to feature in Albuquerque is actually this theater. It's the Chemo Theater. The Chemo Theater was done in a Mayan revival, Southwestern style. Okay. It was built in 1927, and the Mayan revival style was very big, and they combined it with Southwest Native American style to create the Chemo Theater. And you might think the main theming is, all this wonderful Southwestern and Mayan artwork, but that's actually not the main theme of the theater. When you go in, you'll discover the main theme is cow skulls. Everywhere you look, this place is decorated with cow skulls, and they're all lit up so the eyes glow at you. So you're constantly being watched by cow skulls everywhere. And then this beautiful Southwestern art along the walls. See it coming up the stairs, there's another cow skull and more gorgeous artwork. The place was opened in 1927 and was very popular, but as many theaters were during the years. It fell out of favor in the late 50s and 60s and was almost abandoned and demolished. But in 2000, they got a grant to restore it, and they completely remodeled it. It's a gorgeous theater now. It's been open since 2000. They do live theater there. Another interesting thing about this place, well, I'll tell you that in a moment. There's a story that goes with it. As we go into the main theater, if you look up above the stage, there's your cow skulls. Now, their eyes aren't lit up, but when the lights dim for the movie, their eyes lit up and they stare at you, and they're even in the balcony here. And the local kids there used to say they put those in there so that they felt like they were being watched and they would remember to keep their hands to themselves during the movie. I'm going to go back here for a moment. This is where I have my ghost story. The chemo actually is supposedly haunted. There's a child by the name of Bobby Darnell, a 6-year-old boy, was killed when a hot water heater in the lobby exploded. And that happened in 1951. And in 1974, there used to be a tradition where if you had a live show going on there, you'd put donuts out backstage for Bobby, so he'd have something to eat while he was enjoying the show. Well, management prevented them from putting out the donuts. And so in 1974, they were performing the Christmas Carol, and apparently Bobby didn't like this. The sound went wonky, the lights went wonky, they had problems with the backdrops. So after that, since then, they've always maintained a little shrine to Bobby with toys and such so that they can keep him appeased. We didn't get to go back and see that. We were on a self-guided tour. I didn't dare get myself on stage. I didn't have permission. So, but the theming in the chemo is so thorough that even the doorknobs are in the Southwestern Mayan revival style. If you go by, the chemo will let you tour it. So I have a sign for guided tours. Don't hesitate if that sign's not out. I just went up and asked, and they handed me a couple of sheets of paper, and they let me wander the whole thing, me and Mandy, by ourselves. One thing I learned about the route is if you show interest in any place, the people there are so happy to have someone take an interest. It'll often let you in, even if the place is closed. So make sure you don't give up on something just because it appears to be closed. Ask if you can look around. In Albuquerque, nothing really amazing. I couldn't resist having the El Don Motel. You know, got to have that. It's actually one of the more famous signs on the route, but I just had to have a picture of the El Don. Okay, heading out of Albuquerque, we head into the desert. If you look around this bridge, you can tell it's a very different terrain than what we had before. This bridge is called the Rio Puerco Bridge. It's actually a Route 66 landmark. It's on an abandoned alignment of Route 66. This was far and away the most popular picture from Route 66 that I put up on Facebook during my travel log the last time I did it. And I got all these things going. Are you okay? Do you have enough water? Make sure your cell phones are charged. Make sure your car's in good shape. People just looked and said, you know, how can you be driving this old road in the middle of nowhere? Well, I'll tell you a dirty little secret. There's an interstate about 30 feet to my right and a truck stop about 30 feet to my left. The old alignment I'm on is probably no more than 300 or 400 feet long. So I was in civilization the whole time, but this picture did so much better job of exemplifying what it was like to be on an abandoned alignment out in the middle of nowhere. It was better than any of the ones I took actually out in the middle of nowhere. So I kept this picture. It gives you a sense of what it's like, even if this is actually in a little off-ramp off the interstate. All righty. I've told a lot of stories to people along the route, and it's all been about people who've been wonderful. They sit out and tell stories, and they care a lot about you, and they'll give you dinner. We're not going to tell that kind of story here. This is Buddville, and it's located in the town of Buddville. Buddville was founded by a man by the name of Bud Fosse in 1928. And Bud Fosse was not a nice guy. Bud Fosse had a town with a telegraph station, a tow truck station, a maintenance place, a cafe, and a trading post, and a few other things. And he ran the whole town with something of an iron fist. If your car broke down here, Bud would send his tow truck out to get you. He didn't allow other tow trucks in town. He would tow you here to Buddville, and then he would repair it and charge you massively inflated prices. The most famous story about that, and I heard it from multiple people in the area, was that one guy came in with a burst radiator hose, very cheap part, maybe $3 back in the early 60s. And Bud got a new radiator hose and put it on and tried to charge the man $100 for the job. The man said, I won't pay it. That's ridiculous. I'll have someone from California drive out here and get me one. And Bud said, fine. He took a knife, cut the radiator hose off the car, and then told the man, by the way, for every day you park in my parking lot here, I'm going to charge you $75 rent. So the guy pushed his car over to the other side of the road, called a buddy. His buddy came, changed out the hose. While they were changing it, Bud showed up and said, by the way, I own the land on the other side of the road too. You owe me $75. He was really not, he was not a nice man, according to everyone there. But he became very politically powerful because he controlled the whole region. Eventually got himself appointed justice of the peace, and he began to refer to himself as the law west of the Rio Puerco. He was, not someone you wanted to mess with. He was someone you probably wanted to avoid. He was killed in this very store when a robber tried to rob the store. Bud tried to intervene, and he was shot here. Sort of a sad story because his wife, there we go, remarried Flossie and opened the store again. And no more than 3 or 4 years later, someone came in and started a fight there, and her husband died 3 feet from where Bud had died. Budville's been pretty much closed since 1973 when that happened. There have been a couple of attempts to reopen it, but never has succeeded. It's one of the more photographed stops on Route 66 just because of its tragic history. Now, as we're traveling down this alignment of Route 66, oh, by the way, just a note there, Budville has its own off-ramp and on-ramp from the interstate, which is about a mile to the south of it. That's because Bud managed to get the highway department to put one in. No one ever used it, but it was there just so we could get more traffic to his trading post. As you travel down this alignment of Route 66, once the interstate opened up, everything here died. And so there are a ton of old trading posts like this one here. And oops, that's Budville. Old cafes. I just love this one. It's so picturesque. And old Whiting Brothers gas stations. Now, Whiting Brothers was a site all along the route. There were over 100 Whiting Brothers stations in the USA at the company's peak, and over 40 of those were on Route 66. They also had 15 motels and a ton of different truck stops. One of the reasons they were so popular is they sold their gas for less than anyone else, and they did that by not accepting credit, so they didn't have to add on the fees. They also had a neat trick that if you filled up your tank in the summer, they gave you a free bag of ice, which was huge in the summer in the middle of the desert. Unfortunately, the Whiting chain died in the 70s due to fuel shortages and the realignments that came with the interstate when traffic died off. There's only one active Whiting Brothers station left. It's in Moriarty, New Mexico. I couldn't get a good picture of it, so we don't have one here. But you see these signs all along the route. And here you can see there's a motel, a grocery store, and a gas station here, all abandoned. Nothing left of those three but a foundation on the other side of the road. But if you look beyond there, there's another Whiting Brothers station just in the background. That's the gas station that went with the motel and the grocery store. Another sign for the Blue Water Motel. When we were there, someone was actually selling ceramics out of that, but all their web pages and Facebook pages have gone down. I'm afraid the current virus may have taken them out. This was an unexpected discovery. As you're heading out of Blue Water, you come across this building. This is the Boland's Trading Post. Now, Boland's originally opened here in 1936. It was called the Boland's Old Crater Trading Post. Somewhere around here, there's an old crater that apparently was a big tourist stop. I can't find the dang nab thing. I'm still looking for it. But in 1954, he rebuilt on top of the site and created the Boland's Trading Post. Didn't no longer mention the old crater. And this became the basis of a chain. If you ever traveled Route 66 during its golden days, through the Southwest, all the way up to Tucumcari, there were Boland's Trading Posts every time you sneeze. These things were everywhere. And they were very popular because they only sold authentic goods. They didn't sell cheap imported stuff. They didn't sell fake jewelry or fake Navajo blankets. Everything there was the real deal. Unfortunately, they started dying out in 1973 as the interstate began to bypass them, and they're all gone. Now, you'll still see some Boland's truck stops along the way. And yes, they are already an offshoot of this, but the trading posts, unfortunately, are almost all gone. If any of you have gone to a tourist attraction, I believe it's near Tucson, Arizona, called The Thing. It's owned by Boland's as well. This building was added to the Register of National Register of Historic Places in 2006. And with this history, I can understand why, but there's something about this building that most people never knew. When I get out and I photograph a building, I walk all around it. Again, there was very little traffic on the building, so most people never see it, but those who stop very rarely walk around it. And if they do, this is what you'll find. All around the building are these hand-painted paintings of Native American life. Now, they're done in a modern style, but what I was told in town was that the actual things that are depicted are fairly accurate. They're, not in Southwestern style, but they're absolutely gorgeous. They're all around the building. Most of them cannot be seen from the road, so you have to know to go look for them. And they're all just fading and peeling away. And so I did a photo shoot of the whole building, spent well over an hour here. I think my wife was going to go nuts. But just amazing artwork all around this building. You can see here how it's fading and chipping. I don't think this will be here in 20 years. I was very glad to photograph it. So as you leave Blue Water, we come to the Continental Divide, the somewhat realistic idea that water on one direction flows towards the west and the other direction flows towards the east. Not necessarily real line there, but it's close enough. There's an old trading post here, which will give you a good idea of what used to be along the route all over the place, and are almost all gone now. The trading posts were probably the biggest loss on the route when the interstate bypassed it. After that, you descend on into Gallup, New Mexico. Now, Gallup has a Hotel El Rancho, and this also has a fascinating story. The Hotel El Rancho was built in 1937 by a man by the name of R.E. Griffith. R.E. Griffith is not a well-known name, but he had a very famous brother, a guy by the name of D.W. Griffith. And that actually related to this because R.E. built the hotel so that D.W. could have an easier time filming the Westerns that he filmed in the area. This became the base of operation for major Hollywood Western productions for the next 30 or 40 years. Over 116 Westerns were filmed using this hotel as their base. And it was very successful because the locals and the extras there were used in the productions themselves. So they would hire any locals or extras as workers in the films. That contributed to the economy. So the locals really supported this place. Any major film company that was making a film in the area would stay here at the El Rancho. And so there was a ton of Hollywood history here. It's still used that way, by the way. The last movie filmed here that we could find was Bottom of the World in 2017. I've never heard of the movie, but I'm going to go see if I can dig it up. This is the interior. It's classic Southwest architecture. You'll notice the pictures all along the top and on the bottom. Up through here, there's a bunch here. This balcony runs all around the lobby. There's more down here. Those are pictures, autographed pictures of the stars who have stayed here when they came to film their movie, and they just blanket the walls all over the lobby itself. So you can go through and find just about any star you like there somewhere. In the 30s and 40s, actually as late as the 50s.
Sure.
So this is, if we didn't get to stay here, this is the other side on the route that you need to get advanced reservations. We called 24 hours in advance and couldn't get in. So we just stopped in and looked around and had a steak dinner here. But it's an amazing place to look around. There's a whole lot of history here. Now, the Hotel El Rancho ran into a bit of a problem, though, as the 50s came on. Motels became more and more popular, and people wanted to stay in motels rather than hotels. They thought they were more modern and they were more convenient. Well, the Hotel El Rancho built a motel, but they didn't want two signs because they thought that would confuse people, right? Maybe thinking they were two different firms. So the solution was very simple. If you pull into a Hotel El Rancho parking lot, you can look up and see their Hotel El Rancho sign, but if you wait 10 seconds, you'll see their Motel El Rancho sign. Wait another 10 seconds, Hotel El Rancho, and you know the drill. So it goes on and on. And I love the saying at the bottom, the charm of yesterday with the convenience of today, or convenience of tomorrow. I would say this, it's a very well-preserved motel, very well run, but there's nothing tomorrow-like inside the Hotel El Rancho. It's an amazing place. If you're driving through there, you need to stop and just look around. They don't mind if you just walk around and look at the hotel. They don't require you to buy anything or something. And here's our last muffler man of the route. I think I saw a few more, but couldn't get photos. But so this is the last one we're going to see. And this is a sad, sad muffler man. They actually call him Dude Man, and I can't figure out why. I'm trying to get more research done on Dude Man. Maybe Bill's book will help me there. But he looks so lost. He has nothing to hold. And he's just standing there by the route going, they gave me nothing to hold. What am I doing up here? He looks lost and confused as you're leaving town. We're starting to head through the most trading post heavy part of the old route. And there were a lot of trading posts and cafes along the route, and they were run by locals. And many of them didn't have a lot of money. They'd build a shack or something, they'd set something up. They wouldn't have enough money for a sign, especially a neon sign. So what they would do sometimes is they would actually paint their signs on the rocks. You had to drive through a canyon when you left town to get to your next town. And on either side, there are these red rocks. And so they just came in here and painted their advertisements right there on the side of the canyon. This is the area, by the way, where all the Westerns were filmed. I want to go back and watch a few because I strongly suspect this sign is probably behind a famous stagecoach scene that was filmed right along this stretch. Zooming in a bit, you can see it. The sign actually reads Rock Point Trading Post, Navajo rugs, and handmade jewelry. There's a couple of signs for cafes and a motel also. I didn't get all of them, but I just found it fascinating. Can you imagine what would happen if you painted your signs on the rocks of a canyon now? I don't think that would go over very well. One other thing we found here, by the way, while I was taking this photo, I looked down and found some rather large kitty cat tracks. And I determined I was standing in rather large, rather fresh mountain lion tracks. There was some fresh mountain lion remainders right nearby. So I didn't stay long. I figured somewhere a kitty, maybe not so friendly kitty, was watching me. So I got back in the car and we headed on our way. Just beyond that is a little town called Huac, Arizona. There's nothing to remember about Huac, Arizona, except for this one tourist site. Those of you who grew up when I did will remember a show called F Troop that ran from 1965 to 1967. It featured a story about a bunch of cavalry troops in a fort called Fort Courage with a bunch of incompetent Indians or Native Americans living right by. They called them Indians. So the whole joke was the cavalry was incompetent and the Native Americans were incompetent, and it was, comedy for all. It was a big hit in the 60s. In the 70s, they decided, hey, it's still in syndication, it's doing well, let's build a Fort Courage tourist stop. They built it without permission. They didn't get the rights, but they went ahead and built it. And then they got some authentic F Troop props that were used in the production, and they started selling official F Troop souvenirs. And I actually remember stopping at this place when I was a kid in the 70s, but it's been closed for a while. Some of the fort is burned down, but a lot of it still remains. One of the things that struck me about it is the world's most unappetizing theater. How would you like to eat? Well, yes, you're right. Restaurant. Thank you. Well, if it was theater, it'd be even worse. How would you like to eat it? The Pancake, Subway, Taco Bell, coffee shop. Okay. Apparently, this thing went through a whole lot of incarnations. As far as I know, it was never a food court, but all the signs still remain. It's been closed for a couple decades now, and they're still trying to sell it if you want to try to open a tourist trap. We're moving into the Painted Desert. A large area of Route 66 passes through the Painted Desert and the Petrified Forest. Again, as I mentioned last time, I don't do a lot of picture of natural wonders. You see those anywhere. I try to focus on Route 66 specific things. So as you're driving through the Painted Desert, you're going to come across this place here. Mandy, I didn't put the name of the cafe.
Painted Desert Inn.
This is a Painted Desert Inn. It was a small inn located in the middle of the Painted Desert National Park. It was a Harvey house, and their old fountain menu, there's an old soda fountain that's still there. The place where the Harvey girls, the waitresses that worked in Harvey houses, were in the basement. You can go look at those as well. Now, I meant to mention Harvey houses when we got to the El Rancho. Fred Harvey built a chain of restaurants catering to trains starting in 1876, and there were 84 Harvey houses at their peak. If you've seen the Harvey Girls movie, that is the same thing we're talking about here. He would hire young women. They had to be single. They had to be willing to live on site. He gave them a place to eat, gave them food, and paid them a reasonable wage. They worked hard, but Fred Harvey's whole thing was he wanted very high quality at very reasonable prices. And he put these things in train stations throughout the South and Southwest, and along some of the major places along Route 66. Many of the towns we're going to go through had Harvey houses. I'll mention them. Most Harvey houses aren't a lot. They're just, they look like an old building. There's not a lot to mention. I love this one because you can still see the old soda fountain. The El Rancho, actually, when they built it, Griffith went out and got Fred Harvey to come in and train the entire staff because he wanted that level of quality. And Fred Harvey hired and trained the entire staff that worked at the El Rancho, which is one of the reasons Hollywood loved it so much. They catered to train and highway people. And as those eras began to end, they don't really have Harvey houses on the interstate. So the age of Harvey House has passed out. But this is one that remains. Then you can see the old counter. A lot of them are being restored, but there are no Harvey House chains anymore. Now, what you're looking at here doesn't look like a whole lot, but for those who were on my last thing, I told you, if you want to find an old alignment of Route 66, look for two things. Look for telephone poles, look for train tracks. You also want to look for old bridges. You are actually looking at an old alignment of Route 66. To the left of the telephone poles is where it passed. I wouldn't have known it if there wasn't a little plaque right here, and one of my guidebooks mentioned it actually. But this was the original Route 66 alignment that went through the Painted Desert. It was a one-lane dirt road, and when they realigned, it basically was taken back over by nature. You can't even see it on Google Earth anymore, but this is an old section of Route 66 right here. As we move further into the desert, things get further apart. Mandy and I started referring to Arizona as a town that will not forgive you missing an exit, because if you want to use a restroom and you miss an exit, you got 35 miles. I remember that happening till your next exit. So you either better be able to hold it or better be very good on the accelerator, or a combination of both. This is an actual sign in the Rainbow Forest Museum, which is located in the Petrified Forest Park. Warning you that the nearest restroom is over 20 miles away, and that you probably should plan accordingly if you don't stop here. A note that I will agree with: when you're going out into the desert and you see a stop and you think you might need water or you might need gas, especially if you're doing the old abandoned alignment, stop, use the restrooms, get a ton of water. Okay, it is still possible to get stranded on the old alignment and have no one know where you are and have no one come on. Some of these alignments are pretty rough. So we were always careful to have tons of water. In the heat of the day in the desert, it's a very bad situation if you're stuck out there alone with no help. And speaking of needing help, right beyond the Painted Desert, before you get to Holbrook, there are all these wonderful dinosaurs. I don't know who did this, but it certainly wasn't Disney's Imagineers. I don't even know what that thing is on the ground that had a section of drumstick eaten there. But these are old trading posts. And when you had a trading post out there with all the other trading posts in the area, you had to have something that made you stand out. So these big figures were a huge part of the route. Sadly, most of them are gone, but they're still here. I loved this particular one with the Whatzitosaurus being eaten by, I think it's Tyrannosaurus Rex, I'm not sure. And of course, the Native Americans in those times, it always amazed me how they recorded the dinosaurs walking the plains on the side of their living arrangements there. So here you can see that either the Navajos or the Apaches recorded the dinosaurs walking the plains. But it got to be a problem. Oh, no, not yet. But also here, you can get a bargain. Where else can you buy a 99-cent rock, folks? I mean, rocks are going to cost you at least twice as much anywhere else. But here, 99 cents for a rock. It's a great deal. But with all the dinosaurs out there, it got to be a huge problem. You see, the local mannequin population was being preyed on horribly by the dinosaurs. This poor mannequin was bitten in half by this whatever it is, a saurus. And eventually they had to gather together to combat this. And so they came together and they learned to tame the dinosaurs that wandered the field, and even put advertisements on them. And then they learned to ride them across the desert. So now the local mannequin population is safe and secure. And you can see them occasionally riding across the desert near Holbrook as their pink tigers look on. There are so many in this one area just to the east of Holbrook. There are so many of these wonderful fake dinosaurs. And they're all there just to try to make these places that sold rocks and Indian jewelry stand out. it was very, very hard to stand out on the route, especially after traffic began to get back. You had to get someone's attention. And there was a guy along here who actually tried something very different. And his shop is now out of business, but the shop itself tells you the story about what happened if you look carefully. So folks, I'd like to tell you the sad tale of the unfortunate ostrich endeavor. You see, one guy came up with a really clever idea to let people hand feed his ostriches. And he has this wonderful sign, feed the ostriches inside. And I'm sure this brought a lot of people in. But, oh yeah, we forgot to warn you that ostriches bite. So you might want to be careful while feeding the ostriches, but come on in and feed the ostriches. And, oh gosh, Mrs. Johnson, we're sorry about Timmy's little finger. I hope they can reattach it, but please don't have your lawyers call us anymore. We're not responsible for accidents here. And we're starting to think maybe this wasn't the best idea. Maybe anybody want to buy an ostrich? These signs are actually laid out almost exactly in order along the side of this abandoned place. I thought it was hilarious. Some poor guy thought he'd stand out with ostrich feeding, and I'm afraid that may have been his demise. Now, when you used to travel down Route 66, those of you who are my age will remember seeing a picture of a dark bunny on a yellow background and something that simply said 75 miles or 50 miles. Nothing else, just a picture of a rabbit and then a mile marker and nothing else. And this would happen starting about 200 miles out from where you're going here, and no explanation was ever given. Eventually you would come to this sign with a big dark rabbit and it says, here it is. Still no explanation as to what it is. But it is the Jackrabbit Trading Post, and it is a fixture on Route 66. It has been here for a very long, long time. The management actually bought this site. We haven't determined yet whether it was a former Santa Fe Railroad building or a snake farm. I tend to believe snake farm in this part of the world. And while he was driving down to take possession, he had a giant rabbit statue with him that he was hauling in the back of his convertible. And everywhere he stopped on his way there, people saw the rabbit. They liked it. They wanted to take a picture of it. So by the time he finally got to his property, he thought, hey, I've got something here. So he named the trading post the Jackrabbit Trading Post, and taking a page from Merrimack Cavern's book, he started putting up these signs with just the outline of the rabbit and how far you were from the trading post. And by the time people got there, especially the kids, you had to stop to find out what it was. There is still a giant rabbit in front of the trading post. I don't believe this is the original. I forgot to ask when I was in there. But you can climb up, get your picture taken as Mandy prepares to go hopping across the desert. This is the Jackrabbit Trading Post. You will note it still doesn't tell you what it is. If you want to find out what it is, you actually have to go inside. Okay, and this is Cindy Waquez, who owns the Jackrabbit now. She is third generation of owners here. Wonderful lady. Stop in and have a chat with her. I talked to her about my travels through. I've been to the Jackrabbit in the mid-60s and the mid-70s, and we determined that my parents bought some toys for me from her grandparents way back when. I'm going to go back here for a moment to catch a note. One other thing about the Jackrabbit is our last connection to the movie Cars. As the Pixar team came through here, they stopped at the Jackrabbit. They talked with Lizzie for a while, and Lizzie was one of the proprietors at that time. And she became the inspiration for a character there. The Jackrabbit actually appears in the movie, but in the Cars, but there's a Model T out front instead of a Jackrabbit. And the source proprietor was modeled after the current proprietors. And in the credits, there's actually a thank you to Tony and Cindy Waquez. Okay, moving on. What do you do when you were once a big town on Route 66? You had a Harvey house even, beautiful one at that. But all of your trading posts are gone. Your little Valentine diner has been converted into a law office. And there's not much left here. Well, what do? Well, you remember that the Eagles once recorded a song about your town, and you do what you can with that. So they took this corner. If you can see, he's standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona, with a girl in a flat, you're not seeing my mouse, standing in a corner, Winslow, Arizona, with a girl in a flatbed Ford, and there's an eagle hanging out in the windowsill. And you can see the girl eventually did get together. He was able to convince the girl to spend a little time with him. This is probably one of the most popular stops in this part of Route 66. The flatbed Ford is parked nearby, and they invite you to come stand on the corner and sing the song. And yeah, I don't think I ever saw a crowd of this many people anywhere else in this portion of the route. People come just to stand there and sing the song. It's extremely popular. On the edge of Windsor, Arizona is Meteor Crater. I won't spend a lot of time talking about this, but it's something that almost everyone at Route 66 visits. Basically a big crater where a meteor struck many, many years ago. And it's been a tourist stop on Route 66. There's a fascinating museum here if you're interested in visiting it. And you can climb up and look down into the crater. But my main interest in this part of the world is only a few miles down the road, and it is this place. This is a town known as Two Guns. And Two Guns has an actual historical significance as well as a Route 66 history significance. Two Guns was the site of a mass murder in 1878 when a local Navajo tribe who was warring with the local Apache tribe trapped the Apaches in a cave located nearby there, and then lit fires at the entrance of the cave to smoke them out. And they killed all of them. They left their bodies inside the cave, and it became known as the Apache Death Cave. Doesn't sound, it's a tragedy. It doesn't sound like something that would become a tourist attraction, but it did. A guy purchased a town, named it Two Guns, and he built an entire area around this of these stone buildings. He built a tower next to the cave, charged people to go in there. He would sell you the skulls inside the cave. He also built fake cliff dwellings around the edge of the cave so that people could tour those. He claimed they were original. He also had a cafe, a gas station, a couple of gift shops, and a zoo. Okay, this zoo has fascinated me since the first time I saw it in the book I recommended, The Mother Road. I wanted to find this place. Well, it's on private property, kind of hard to reach. Usually he's got a gate closed and a sign saying no trespassing. So I went down, I got on the old alignment to where this property line comes, and the gate was open and the sign was gone. That's all I needed. And I pulled right on in and toured the zoo. The zoo actually at one time contained mountain lions, cougars, Gila monsters, coral snakes, birds, and a lynx. It was not what you call the San Diego Zoo by any means. I'm actually very glad I never saw it when it was running. You're looking at the mountain lion enclosure. There were like 6 or 7 of these. It's about 3 or 4 feet deep. It was covered with chicken wire right here. That used to cover the route. It was no more than 3 or 4 feet deep and no more than 10 feet wide. And that's where he kept his mountain lions. I can't even imagine. I'm very glad it's not happening anymore, but the ruins are fascinating to tour. Behind the ruins, this is the old alignment of Route 66 that went through Two Guns. You can see another building back here. The whole site is littered with these ruins from the old Two Guns town. He literally built an entire town here. All of it's gone, but the ruins still remain. This was the gift shop, I believe. And this was Route 66 here, 1-lane road. This is a canyon called the Diablo Canyon. And it doesn't look like much, but it's actually over 100 feet deep in some places. And in the rainy season, it will fill to the brim. So bridges were very difficult to construct over this. This was considered a modern marvel of a bridge in its time. I didn't dare try to drive out this old alignment, but the bridge is still there. And you can see the old alignment heading off into the distance there. Just down the road from Two Guns is Twin Arrows, which was built in 1954 and got its name from Two Guns. They said, well, if you can have 2 guns, I can have 2 arrows. And they put a trading post here as well. The 2 arrows in the parking lot are in the National Registry of Historic Places. They're extremely well known on the route. Almost every picture book you get on 66 will have a picture of these 2 arrows. The trading post is actually there. It's been shut down for a long time. The Native Americans who owned the land built a casino on the other side of the road, and they're not very much interested in this place running again because it would pull away from their business over there. This is the old Twin Arrows trading post. It featured a drink shop or a cold drink stand here, the actual trading post here, and then a little flashback to last week's presentation. Who remember me talking about the Valentine dining system? Well, you could get a Valentine diner, which was a 6-seat diner? No, 8-seat diner. I can't remember how many. 6 seats. 6-seat diner. It was delivered on the back of a flatbed truck, and it was $5,000 or I don't know how many easy payments of $400 a month. They put it on there. You hook up the electricity and plumbing, and you're ready to rock and roll. And if you look back here, this is an old Valentine diner that was sitting there on the Twin Arrows Trading Post. There is hope that someday that there'll be people will be allowed to come in and restore this, because it is an iconic site on Route 66. I don't think it's on the registry of historic places except for the Arrows, though, so we may lose it. Just thought I'd give you an idea of what an abandoned alignment looks like. This was taken near there. If you get out, you won't see this from the interstate, so you got to know where to look. But if you get on, this is basically what they end up looking like. I grabbed a piece of asphalt from this road. It's sitting on the stand behind me, my own little piece of Route 66 from here. But if you look carefully, there are all these little stretches of Route 66, some very close to the highway that you can explore. Others go way away from the highway, and that's a little bit more challenging. This is located, and I skipped completely over. Oh, well. This is located in Siegelman. This is called the Snowcap Drive-In, and the Snowcap Drive-In is a great place to stop for lunch if you happen to be there, or dinner. The whole place is based on the idea of a practical joke. I'll give you an example. You know, they have all this unusual decoration on the outside, but if you take a look at this door, you know, you can see the sign that says pull. You can see the doorknob. Look where the hinge is, right? Good luck pulling this door. You actually can open this. There's a slightly hidden handle on the other side that you have to, but I watched 3 people. I did it too. Pull on this doorknob and nothing happens. And they sell slightly used napkins and soda straws, and the whole place is just covered with this sort of thing. The people serving your food put on a little show for you with every order. Well worth your time if you can stop at the Snowcap. Highly recommend it. This is one of the most unusual theaters I ever came across. As you proceed down the route from Siegelman towards the Grand Canyon area, you'll come across a place called Grand Canyon Caverns. Now, Grand Canyon Caverns is not associated with the Grand Canyon in any way, shape, or form. They just named it there, I think, to pull in the money. It's a great cave tour, you know, not one of the best, but good. But they have this unusual thing. You see, in 2012, the American Film Institute decided they were going to tear out their theater seats. Now, those seats had been used for over 60 years and had been sat in by all of the greats in Hollywood's golden era, like Marilyn Monroe, Frank Sinatra, John Travolta, Alfred Hitchcock, Steven Spielberg. All of them sat in these theater seats. And so they said, hey, great, we'll buy all those seats from you. We'll put them in our cave. Now, our cave has low humidity and it's nice and cool. So everything is preserved well down here. AFI loved it because the seats would be preserved. So they sold it cheap. Grand Canyon Caverns set up a movie theater there in the cave. They thought, hey, licensed print money. You can watch a movie in a cave in a historic theater seat. This is wonderful. That was until the state inspector came through and informed them that all movie theaters must have one entrance and a separate exit. And they're in a cave, no separate exit. And so the theater is there, but it cannot be used as a theater. So you have a historic theater in a cave that cannot be used as a theater. They're willing to sell you the seats for $1,500 a pair or $500 each. They don't plan to sell all of them, but I might, if I can find the money, actually pick up a couple of these. They also have a hotel room down there. It's right on the tour. As you can see, there's people in the background taking pictures. A couple of double beds. It rates for, I think, around $850 a night, something like that. It's pretty expensive. It is, as I said, right on the tour. When the last tour goes through, they'll deliver you a dinner. They'll turn off the lights. They do advise that you're up and dressed by the time the first tour comes through in the morning. I think that'd probably be good advice. Also, weddings are done here because the air is cool and dry in the caverns. A lot of people love to get married here. If you look down here on this salt stone, you'll see a bride's bouquet. It's over 15 years old, being preserved by the cool, dry air. So they like to leave a little bit of the bride's bouquet here. And the walls have these all in the area where they have the weddings. There are all these hanging on the walls and being preserved by the cave's natural air. This portion of Route 66 all the way through until you get past, well, almost all the way into the end of the route is brutal in the summer and not so great in the winter. It's hot, it's dry. Many sections of the road, especially the old alignments, do not see a lot of traffic. There used to be signs all along it that would warn you. It would be 300 miles to water. Those signs used to have skull and crossbones. I can't find any of those signs. I think they've all been stolen. I have pictures from books, but I couldn't get it. This is as close as I could get. But even today, it is a good idea to make sure you have water with you just in case. But back in the days, in the golden era, when cars needed water bags and such, you would, every time you hit a gas station, you would fill up your water bags because you never knew when you'd get another chance to put water in your radiator. Now, one of the things I love about Route 66, especially in its rebirth that's going through now, is new tourist traps are popping up. And this is the Ranchero little tourist stop. And it's home of Giganticus heticus. Okay. And, you know, perhaps the most dramatic sight you're going to find along this whole portion of the route. Ladies and gentlemen, I call your attention to, and I want you to remember this, Giganticus heticus. There he is. At least they don't charge for him. But I saw the sign. I had to go see what it was. And that's what they're going for, I guess. But there it is, Giganticus heticus. This sort of thing was Route 66 hallmark for years, and they're starting to pop up again. I love it. Now, I could show you a ton of pictures of the Grand Canyon. Not going to do it, but I did take one sign because I love this sign. People, it's sad, I guess. It shouldn't be funny, but people, every year, many people die taking selfies at the rim of the canyon, and they fall at the Grand Canyon, they fall in. And there are signs everywhere. There are people whose their whole job is to run up and down the rim going, get away from the side of the canyon. And yet I saw people literally leaning backwards to take a selfie over the edge. I saw multiple people. So much so that they put up this sign that says, don't be an idiot, in 6 different languages with a picture guide as well. And still, nope. But this is the only time I've ever seen a sign in 6 different languages that basically says, don't be a moron. I won't tell you the whole story of Cool Springs. It was founded a very long time ago on the route. It was founded during the route's golden age. As the route's decline happened, it was abandoned. It fell down. If you see the film Universal Soldier, part of it was filmed here when Cool Springs Cabins was still in ruins. About 15 years ago, a gentleman bought it, rebuilt it. You can see the pillars up here have white stone. Anywhere you see white, that's the original stand. But he got the original plans, rebuilt it exactly as it stood. The reason I took a picture here, it's a great place to stop in, get a bite, look at their gift shop. But the reason I got a picture is he preserved one of the original guest canyons. So cabins, yes, not canyon. That'd be a whole different experience. It even has satellite. It's probably available if you want it. I'm just amazed. So this is a sort of place people would stay in during the Depression and Dust Bowl era of the route. Yeah, but there's one cabin back there if you want it. Now, heading out of here, you start up to a place called Sitgreaves Pass. You may have heard Bill talk about last time we were here about this incredibly challenging pass to the mountains, and that was Sitgreaves Pass. Sitgreaves Pass crosses the mountains before you descend down into the valley that sits just before California. It is a very steep path coming from the east to the west. You go up 1,400 feet in 9 miles and then drop 700 feet in 2 miles. It is filled with hairpin curves and sheer drops and 0 guardrails. Okay. Back in the days when this was the primary alignment of Route 66, this was a deadly section of the route. People would go up, they would lose control of their cars and go over the edge. People coming back down, especially on that really steep drop on the other side, their transmissions would go out and their brakes would go out and they'd lose control. There were professional drivers sitting on both ends of the pass who would charge you. In 1945, they charged $3.50. They're actually mentioned in Jack Rittenhouse's guide that I told you about earlier. They charge you $3.50 to go up there. As Bill mentioned, it wasn't unusual. I actually have done a little reading for them to take about halfway up and then suddenly increase the rate. This pass was very challenging. A lot of cars couldn't handle it. They couldn't make the climb or they couldn't hold their brakes coming down. Mandy and I drove it. This is the only picture I have, and this is up at the top where things were not so bad. I wanted to take more pictures, but I was too busy trying to keep the car on the road, and Mandy was too busy praying that I was going to keep the car on the road. Even today, with a good car, with more than able to handle it, with good traction and everything, This is one scary drive, folks, and there's still no guardrails. So I highly recommend you do it, but do it slowly.
And in daylight.
And in daylight. Do not attempt to pass at night. You'll come down into a little town. Oatman, thank you. Why isn't it on the slide? Come down into a little town called Oatman. This was an old gold mining town that has seen 2 rounds of bad luck. Back in 1924, it was a gold mining town, and the mines shut down and nearly killed it. But about the same time, Route 66 primary alignment came through here, and that brought life back to them. When the mine shut down, they released all the burros. Now, if you notice back here, there's a little sign warning about burros for the next 8 miles. That is because all those burros very happily bred, and they're everywhere, and they will step out in front of your car. They love coming into town here. So they lost the town, almost went to a ghost town. Then Route 66 came through and they were saved. Then Route 66 was realigned and they died again. However, they have since rebuilt themselves as a tourist trap. They actually hold gunfights here 4 times a day, depending on how many people are in town. That's the only place I know that still does the imitation gunfights. Their big claim to fame, well, there are 2 of them. One is this motel, one of the oldest operating motels in Arizona, where they claim that Clark Gable and Carol Lombard spent their honeymoon night after getting married in Kingman, Arizona. Probably not from what we've been able to determine, but they have a whole room set up that they claim was their honeymoon suite. Personally, I think Clark could probably have done better than this, but who knows? The other big thing is the burros. They come into town, they own the town, they have the right of way at all times, and they know it. And there are all sorts of burro chow dispensers all along the sidewalk, so you can grab yourself a handful. They know that too. And so once you come into the town, you will get your own private burro attached to you who will hope that you have food in your hand. And you can feed the burros. As a matter of fact, if you like these burros, you think they're cute, you can actually adopt one of the burros and take them home. So that's a great souvenir for your next trip. After you go through Oatman, you cross the valley and cross into the town of Needles. This is not Needles, by the way. Needles is, at one point, it was a huge stop on Route 66. There are still a lot of old motels. None of them are really that photogenic for me. This was near here is where the agricultural inspection station was in Needles, which used to be used for not only agricultural inspection, but also to keep people they thought were undesirable out of California. From Needles, the route would turn south and it headed for about 50 miles south of its current alignment. The current alignment, by the way, is the interstate. The problem is we talked about why the route isn't maintained anymore. The federal government, Bill was right, the federal government didn't want to pay for it anymore. And the states, it was left up to the states. Well, on this alignment of Route 66, all the way up from Needles to Amboy, there were 5 bridges that washed out. And the governor just didn't want to pay for repairing them. So that whole section has been closed. And you rejoin the route. If you know where to turn off the interstate, you can rejoin the route right here in a little town called Amboy. It has this famous service station in Royce. It was built here in, where was it built? It was built here in 1938. It survived for a long time as a popular stop on Route 66. Later, when the route was realigned to the interstate, it lost its business. The whole town was sold to a man named Albert Acura, who owns the Juan Pollo restaurant chain, for $425,000. For that, he got Roy's Motel, Cafe, the church, post office, 3 gas pumps, 2 dirt airstrips, and any other building that happened to be in town. The airstrips were some of the first in California, and they're popular. Harrison Ford flies in here regularly and has lunch at Roy's because he loves the old historic airstrip. Albert Acura actually wrote a book called The Chicken Man with a 50-Year Plan, and we're going to run across Albert a little bit later on because this isn't the only place on the route that he owns. This is an old abandoned gas station after the route was realigned. We have a ton of these. I just love to look at the pumps. If you saw the movie Baghdad Cafe, this is where it was filmed. The original Baghdad Cafe burnt down, so they moved it here, but this is where they filmed the movie with Whoopi Goldberg. This is just another old motel that I just love the fact the motel sign is there and nothing is left except this wonderful heart-shaped fountain. You can see in the back, you can see here the foundations for the old motel. There used to be a chain that was very popular in California called Polygas. It ran from 1920s to late 1950s. They were bought by Wilshire Oil, but they still sold themselves as Polygas. If you search for Polygas on eBay, you'll find a ton of neon parrot-shaped signs. This is a location of an old Polygas station. It went out of, or it stopped being called Polygas in 1960, but the sign remained here. The gas station and the repair shop are gone, but the Polygas sign is maintained. The neon still works. I couldn't stay there to see it working. I love the fact that regular was 18,910 and Ethel, I haven't heard it called Ethel in forever, was 21,910. Another favorite site on Route 66. This is in Oro Grande, California. It's the Bottle Tree Ranch. This was built by a man named Elmer Long. Elmer started building this in the year 2000. He used to explore the desert with his father. They find old garbage dumps and other things, and his father collected bottles. When his father passed, Elmer kept the bottles, wanted something to do with them. So in the year 2000, he put up one pipe and put some of the bottles out there. He noticed people on the route would stop and take pictures while he was doing it. So later he decided to get serious about it. And in 2002, he started building the ranch. It contains over 200 bottle trees at this point. And it's just great. They're really close in. It's a little hard to maneuver. He's got all sorts of things, from old typewriters to there's a 22 on top of one of them. There's an old handmade rake that he found at a homestead out near Edwards Air Force Base. A traffic light, a gear. This place is a lot of fun to wander. It was a classic drop on Route 66. It used to be that Elmer would come out and greet you and tell you about the whole place. Unfortunately, we lost Elmer last year in June of 2019 at the age of 72. And it looked like we were going to lose the ranch as well. It sat closed for over 3 months, but the family decided it was too valuable, so they've got it open again. It's free to come through. I don't know if the family is still out there talking to people, but it's still worth the stop. And if you leave a donation, you can take a piece of broken glass from some of the bottles, take it home as a souvenir if you leave a donation there. We're getting closer to the end of the route. We're almost there. Thank you for hanging in with me. This is in Rialto. Some of you who live in California have almost certainly seen the Wigwam Motel. This was built in 1947. Along Route 66, there were a ton of these, but most of them were part of a chain. This was an independent thing. They're very well built, very comfortable. But unfortunately, as it changed hands and owners, they were allowed to get run down, and eventually they got to the point where they were rented out by the hour. The motto under the sign was do it in a teepee. Perhaps not the classiest place. Thankfully, in 2005, it was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. They got a grant from the Route 66 Historical Association, and it was completely remodeled and turned into a class place. We stayed there one night. That was our teepee. This is what it looks like on the inside. It is actually one of the more spacious rooms we stayed at during our journey. Very comfortable, modern restroom. I have zero complaints about the hotel. If you've ever wanted to try sleeping in one of these teepees, I recommend it. Remember I told you we'd see Mr. Akura? Well, this is him again. He bought the side of the original McDonald's, and he opened a McDonald's hamburger museum on the side of the original McDonald's. Anything you want to know about McDonald's, it's here. You can visit McDonald Land again. You can get a toy from that. Well, you can't get it, but you can see all the toys from the Happy Meals. You can even view a piece of the original restaurant's floor. He is very proud of it. We ran into him while we were there. He is very proud of his museum. Told us a lot. But boy, if you want to know anything about McDonald's, I highly recommend you go there. He's a walking McDonald's landmine or gold mine of information. Maybe a landmine too. Took us a long time to get out. All up and down the route, you used to see these orange stands. They used to be very hot, and people were looking for something cool to drink. And so they started building these orange-shaped stands. And they were huge during the Depression era of the route. At its height, one guy owned a chain with just 16 stands in California alone. They became so popular that that man who owned that chain, a guy by the name of Frank Pohl, actually tried to copyright the word orange. It didn't work. The judge turned it down. Over the years, as traffic died down, the interstates took over. These became less common. There are only 6 remaining ones now. And one of these is sitting outside of Bono's Italian restaurant. Bono's used to have its own orange, but they tore it down when the market died. But they moved this orange from 3 miles up Route 66. The man who moved it was a guy by the name of Joe Bono. Nobody's ever heard of him, but his claim to fame, not only is the Italian restaurant, but he's cousin of Sonny Bono. This little orange stand is actually on the National Register of Historic Places. And by the way, we couldn't eat there because it was closed, but Bono's Italian restaurant has a great reputation.
And it's open again.
And it's open again. Just south of those, we're heading closer to Santa Monica. We're almost there. If you look to the right, you're going to find a little park there. And on that park, you're going to find this little slab of pavement. This is the original alignment of Route 66. Notice it's 1 lane wide. It was paved, unlike some of them. And they left it there so you can just, get a sense of it. I told you that there was a Mayan revival style, very popular in the late 20s. This is one of the earliest examples. On Route 66 is called the Aztec Hotel. It was built in 1925. It's in Monrovia, California. And it is so completely decorated that even the electrical fixtures inside have a Mayan motif. Very few of these Mayan buildings remain, actually. There are only 2 or 3. One of the ones is the theater we saw earlier. This building has something of a troubled history. It was built, the architecture made it famous almost instantly, and it sat on the route for only 6 years, and then a realignment took the route away. I haven't ridden that alignment yet, but it took the route away. Fortunately, though, it became well known locally, and it continued to be patronized, and there's still a going concern. The owners work very hard to keep it in its original condition, so much so I don't recommend you stay here in the summer because they refuse to install air conditioning because they say that would take away from the authenticity of the experience. They even have the original furniture. Looking in here, I feel like I'm looking into the lobby of the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. But most of the furniture you see here is original to the hotel. It's maintained very well. The reviews are actually quite good, but like I said, we might try to stay it if we come through in cooler months, but not during the summer. And we enter Santa Monica, and suddenly, without ceremony or anything, the route simply stops. You're about 4 blocks west of the ocean. Nope.
No,
East of the ocean. Spin your compass, take your bets. We're about 4 blocks east of the ocean, and it just stops. I don't know why they didn't run it all the way down to the ocean, but they didn't. There at the end of the route is Mel's Historic Drive-In, and this is where we ate our last dinner on the route. It's actually quite good food here. They have in the windows a map of Route 66 that you can look at, done in little tiny model form. However, it is not the end of the highway itself. It stops being Route 66, but the highway continues as the Will Rogers Highway. Almost all of Route 66 from the time you enter Oklahoma till the time you get here is actually the Will Rogers Highway as well. And this is the official end of Route 66 when it T-bones up against the ocean. And you can find a plaque right at that point that dedicates the Will Rogers Highway. Many people, however, feel like the route doesn't stop in those 2 places, but instead takes a left and then a quick right and heads down Santa Monica Boulevard. It actually doesn't do this, but so many people believed it did that there is a sign on the pier there that tells you that this is the end of the route. Now, folks, whether you believe it or not, this is the end. If you want to go down further down this section of what you think is Route 66, you better have some pretty good insurance because it's not going to go so well. And with that, folks, I mount up on my mighty dinosaur as I ride off into the badly photoshopped skies. But before I depart, do you have any questions for me?
Well, thanks, Don. Appreciate it. You did, I don't know if you knew it, but you missed a major New York 64 World's Fair connection.
I did. Where would that be?
Hang on, let me share my screen.
Okay, let me get out of it here.
Yeah.
I got to get out. Share screen. Okay, yeah, you're in.
Okay. Here's the New Mexico Running Indian Trading Post, which was done by Bolin. So
yes.
They were still in business in 64, and they had the trading post at the World's Fair, and they sold a postcard and mentioned their chain of trading posts across New Mexico.
Huh, I didn't know they were there.
Yeah, they were there, and like I said, they actually had a postcard. Most of the postcards you had to buy. Bolin liked to give them away, and it's pretty neat. So you can see Running Indian was their theme, and it's the Bolin Trading Post. So as soon as you were mentioning it, I said, I remember the name Bolin. You also mentioned the cavern. Don't you know that the cavern went out of business and they had to dig it up? I mean, not cavern, crater. They had to dig it up and fill it in when it went out of business. Bad joke.
Mhm.
By the way, folks, I am sorry that I went over. I'd gotten this thing down to 1 hour and 10, but once you get me talking, I tend to run over.
Hour 20.
Did I do 1 hour and 20?
Mhm.
Well, that's not so bad. but no, I thank you for that Boland's connection. Bill, did they keep that building or was it torn down?
It was torn down at the end of the fair, but yeah, it was just I had gone to one of the bowling things when we were taking our drive on 66, and the light bulb went off, and the people at the trading post today had no idea they had even been at the World's Fair, but ran back and connected the two of them together.
Is that photo on one of your CDs? I'll need to grab it.
I don't know if it. I'll send it to you. If that other pictures, I probably have about 20, 30 pictures of the trading post.
I picture it. Yeah, Boland's. Well, you drove the route in the time I did. Boland's was everywhere. I mean, they were just everywhere. And now, there are a few truck stops with the name, but nothing like what it once was. And the original building is still there, but it's just completely closed off and rotting away.
Yeah, I was trying to find our pictures of my family sitting on the jackrabbit. So great to see yours. Other thoughts? Anybody else that's taken the route, or any memories you've had of being on parts of it?
This is Kathy G. My husband John has a question. So here goes.
Hi, Don. Thank you. I enjoyed those both segments that you did over those 2 weekends. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
We're in Los Angeles, and a couple questions I had. Where is that section of road that was in that park? Is that's somewhere in Los Angeles, I think, isn't it? Like in Pasadena or something?
It's actually a little north. Mandy, can you get the adventure guide? It's in the adventure guide, I think. I'll look it up for you real quick. Actually, I may have it on the photo. I keep the photos here so I can pull up coordinates. The original section of Route 66, as you're coming down out of San Bernardino. It might even be in San Bernardino.
I think it is San Bernardino. We're looking for that. Tom Brooks mentioned here in the chat. Did you see the satellite dish on that very old metal rental shack? When we have the the hotel out back, and when you and I had gone through this originally, Don, we were talking about it, that the place looks like it's going to fall over in a stiff breeze, and there's a satellite dish on it.
Yep, I've got several ruins that have
I think it's Paris Hill Park here.
Let me take a look here. Yeah, it's right nearby the. Oh, I couldn't do anything on that either. The California Theater, so many things I couldn't do. It looks like Paris Hill Park, which is in San Bernardino. Yes, indeed.
I see. Okay.
And if you're driving west, it'll be on your right. It is hard to spot. The park is long and narrow, and it's at the westernmost section of the park. So don't give up looking for it.
Okay. And the Aztec Motel, where was that located again?
The Aztec, I do have the location for. Let me get my slide presentation up here real quick. 66. And you can, they were closed the day we were there, so I couldn't look in. It's in Monrovia.
Oh, okay.
And it is, you only see a small section in my photo. It's a beautiful building. I mean, just gorgeous. There are several other buildings in that area that I didn't get a chance to cover because I had to cut so much out. But this is a one of a kind along the route. I couldn't leave this one out.
Yeah. And you're right around the discussion about the end of the route in Santa Monica. I know there's people had thought it went along Santa Monica Boulevard, and then you had pointed out it's there. Actually, that Mel's Diner is really kind of like on a, well, it's not Olympic, but it's kind of like the end of Olympic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mel's is the current reincarnation of that. I think it used to be a Ship's, what was called Ship's coffee shops, and they disappeared a long years ago. And then it was a discount dental office, and then like Dr. Beecham, discount dentist, and then Mel's took it over, and they've got a few locations in Los Angeles. They're the current occupants of that building. But that's an Art Deco building in its own right.
Yeah, it is. The food there was pretty good for our last meal on the route. I was very pleased. If you're a Route 66 aficionado, we didn't travel. There are, as you head into LA, there are so many different alignments in through there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with LA's sprawl, most of the evidence that it was Route 66 is gone. If you read Rittenhouse's guide, again, the little guy, he talks about going down all the way to City Hall, and then turning out north from there. So that's not the alignment we took. But in 45, apparently the main alignment took you right by City Hall, which I didn't know. So
Well, thank you.
let me get the questions up. Any other questions while I'm pulling up the comments here?
Yeah, Don, if this is one of the first transcontinental highways, how did it get the number 66 designation?
It actually, there is no real story behind that, except I guess the number system used for highways is, I think even numbers are east-west and odd numbers are north-south.
Yeah, it's true for the interstates, yes.
But other than that, it's a good question. Everything I've read doesn't really provide an answer other than that's what they chose.
Now, did you ever do a road trip on US 30? That runs from Atlantic City, New Jersey, goes all the way to California.
That the Lincoln Highway?
The Lincoln Highway.
We are actually talking about doing the Lincoln. There's also a north-south route up from Texas all the way up north that's very well known, and I've lost the number. We want to try that as well. But our next trip is going to be another 66 trip. One of the things, and doing these, I want to thank you all for letting me do this, because to fill in some of the stories to make sure I wasn't just making it up out of memory, I started doing research again, and now I'm back in the rabbit hole. There's so much stuff to learn. I keep, I didn't know that, and I didn't know, and I'm going off. So now there are a ton of new things I have to go visit and see. So we need to go back out, and then we'll probably do the Lincoln Highway sometime in the next couple of years. That's a longer trip though. It's coast to coast rather than just
That's about
2,000.
3,500 miles, I believe.
About 1.5 times the length of Route 66. So, any other thoughts or questions here? I'm trying to get the comments back up.
Yeah, someone was asking if you had mentioned the TV show Route 66, which you did the first time.
Yeah, it's made the route famous, but at the same time, it wasn't filmed on the route. It was filmed in Hollywood. There's some of it was filmed on the route, but for the most part, they just pretended. So, the TV show is what people think about, but nah, I don't know. I actually have the whole series downstairs in a bookcase, but we've never watched it. So, where are the comment sections here? There we go, chat. Let's see. Just looking through the comments here. The paintings are reminiscent of the murals on the walls in Herculaneum and Pompeii. I have been to both those sites, and I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, they kind of are. Well, thank you for the reference on the Fred Harvey biography. Almost every town, large town you stop at in the Southwest has an old Harvey house, and I took pictures of all of them, but this would have to be the Harvey house presentation to do that. They're luckily that they're being restored. There's some wonderful stuff there. They're sat empty for a long time. Yeah, and yeah, Red Headlong. Needles, Needles, Arizona. Needles, Arizona actually is one of the hottest places on earth, by the way. Somebody commented about Needles. And that's about all of it. Anybody else have any questions?
For years, my dad, he just loved the Spike character in the Peanut strips. And every time my dad came out to California to visit from New York, and we'd take road trips all the time. The whole family would pile in a car or a van, and we'd go places. And he kept talking about how come I never took him to Needles. So I finally drove in the Needles, and he had very little to say after that. So
I'm afraid it's not the town it once was. I remember it from my childhood, all these wonderful themed motels, and now it's just kind of there. One thing nearby Needles, there's a bridge that crosses the river over into California, and that bridge is featured prominently in the Grapes of Wrath movie. The bridge is still there. The route doesn't cross over it anymore, but it's still there. So if you're looking for Route 66 history, that's still out there for you.
have to go visit the hotel in Monrovia. That's only about an hour, hour and a half from me.
Hmm. They're open most of the time, so you can go and look around. I'd love to hear what you think about it. I had to take those pictures through the windows. So
Well, again, appreciate you doing this, Don. If anybody ever does have a chance to drive along it, again, I've only been on the half we did today. I would like to see the other half, but it is really interesting. You just drive along and there's all the wreckage of ruins of everything along the way. And unfortunately, it's the way a lot of other places are. You drive upstate New York today and, there's ruins of old hotels, and diners and restaurants and everything. So everybody's on the interstate and ripping by these places, but I remember we took the family to Meteor Crater, and it was fascinating. The thing is so much bigger than you could possibly think about, and how deep it is and everything. But if you weren't on Route 66 or Route 66, you wouldn't ever be, passing it. So there's all sorts of things just off the road that are really kind of fun to see.
mhm. Yeah, actually, Meteor Crater, if as you're driving up to it, just before you get to the crater, you'll see a large dirt road that crosses literally near the banks of the crater. That's the old alignment, and you can pull onto it and drive almost all the way to Two Guns.
Yeah, we did
Okay.
that.
You did that, huh?
Yeah.
Was Two Guns open when you were there?
No.
Yeah, I was very lucky to get on site. I couldn't believe my luck because he's very protective of it. But anyway, yeah, thanks again. And folks, again, I'm sorry that you had to stick around for so long, but I'm glad you stayed with me.
Well, I was just upset there were no gas stations open along the way, and I didn't know how long it was going to take to get to one.
As long as you're not in Arizona, there'll be one soon.
Yeah. Great. For next week, we have another Don as the guest speaker, a fellow named Don Ballard. If anybody's familiar with him, he's written several very nice books about the Disneyland Hotel. He's become real enamored of it and became friends with the Rather family, who is famous for Lassie, other things, but they also owned the Disneyland Hotel until they sold it to the Disney Corporation. So he has had total access to their vaults, has been restoring their film collection. Jack Rather, besides owning hotels and that, was also a big amateur filmmaker, and he has some fascinating footage. They did, for example, a fundraiser with the Mouseketeers were at the side of the Disneyland Hotel doing a fashion shoot and modeling the latest dresses and clothes of the time. And he's got some incredible footage. So we're going to be taking a look at still pictures and then movies of the Disneyland Hotel. So I invite folks to join us for that next week. And then again, if anybody has other things, if you've been on the Lincoln Highway or if you've been to other parts of the country and you'd like to take us all there along with you, again, more open to it. Somebody just sent me something about the Tower of the Four Winds. Matter of fact, see if I still have that on my computer. I can share the screen real quick. It's up here. Okay, yeah, here, let me just refresh this 1 second. Jeremy, I don't know if you're still on. Would you like to talk about your project real quick?
I don't see a Jeremy here.
He might have had to go. Let me just
Yeah.
pop this up real quick. Share screen. Okay. This is a project they did recreating the Tower of the Four Winds in virtual 3D. They've got it for the Oculus system right now, and they had a earlier version which was done for the PC virtual reality, and it's really neat. They used my photo collection to digitize it and do it. And you can walk up to the Tower of the Four Winds. You can look around, and all the little whirligigs are spinning around and that sort of thing. So I've asked Jeremy to join us in a future week and take us for a tour of the Four Winds and that sort of thing. So again, if anybody has a segment that you think would even run just 15 minutes, 20 minutes, doesn't have to go the whole time, just let me know. We'll be glad to, do a potpourri like we did for the, Collectorama edition of this. So appreciate folks joining. I hope everybody's having great weather. We're 40 degrees cooler out here than we were a week ago. So I am thoroughly enjoying that. And it's going to be a little bit warmer during the week again, but seeing all the fall foliage going nice and everything back east. So I thought by this time of year, we'd all be out of the houses and running around again. Now we're gonna be bunkered down for winter, so hopefully we can find some things to entertain ourselves with. So thanks, Don, again, appreciate it.
Thanks,
I think I'm gonna go get a root beer float or some apple pie today and memory of your efforts, but I appreciate the time and effort you put into it.
Yeah,
well,
thank
thank
you, Don. Thank you, Don. I appreciate it. And thanks, Bill, for hosting these meetings.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Thank you, Bill. Doing
Thank
that.
you, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll
Great,
see you all
everybody have a
next
great
weekend.
week. And one other thing, everybody, hope you voted or you're gonna vote soon, so.
I voted already.
Yep.
Yeah. Drop
By
my-
mail.
We have a box just down at the end of our street. I dropped the ballots in. They already got it acknowledged, so don't have to stand on the line. I have to work full place security that night, but hopefully it'll be a quiet night and everything will be good. So great. Well, thanks all, and we'll see you hopefully next week for the Disneyland hotels.
Okay, bye-bye, folks.
Definitely.
Bye.
See you later. Bye. All.